Thinking of this, he chuckled bitterly, somewhat self-deprecatingly, thinking to himself, with only 3 days left to live, why bother about immortality? Isn't this just disturbing oneself unnecessarily? Though he had opened his heart, he couldn't bear to see the 2 children still lying on the ground. For a moment, he couldn't think of any good solutions. Glancing around, he saw a pine tree in the distance, which could provide some shelter from the storm. It was better than nothing. Gathering his strength, he lifted the 2 children and struggled to make his way there. Finally reaching the tree, he carefully placed the 2 children down. Pootsie was completely exhausted, immediately sitting down against the tree trunk, panting heavily. The heavens and earth are indifferent, using all beings as mere fodder. This Taoist saying, uttered by Pootsie, carried a hint of bitterness and resentment. The sky was as dark as ink, enveloping the earth. Boundless dark clouds pressed down. Raindrops fell from the sky, dense and fine. The cold wind blew, hitting the face with a chilling sensation. Looking up at the sky for a while, Pootsie slowly withdrew his gaze. Looking at the 2 children in front of him, he muttered softly, "Dear young patrons, the old monk intended to help, but alas, was powerless. This matter originated from me, but ended up harming you both. It's truly sinful. If you 2 were disciples of Qingyun, among the crowd on Qingyun Mountain, it might have been safer, but now ... Suddenly, Pootsie trembled all over, murmuring, "Disciples of Qingyun ... disciples of Qingyun ... double quotes. His thoughts raced, seeming to grasp something, but were about to lose it in the blink of an eye. In a moment, he broke out in a cold sweat. Then, for some unknown reason, the inexplicable fervor reappeared in his eyes. He laughed heartily to the heavens, but there was a hint of madness in his laughter. Marvelous, marvelous. Though my life is short, if I pass on Buddhist techniques to someone and then have them join Qingyun, practicing Taoist techniques, wouldn't it be killing 2 birds with 1 stone? This way, I can save their lives and fulfill my wish." Buddhism and Taoism have always been at odds, never associating with each other. Qingyun would never expect a young child who's grown up under Qingyun Mountain to possess profound knowledge of Buddhist techniques. As long as someone learns both disciplines, they can surely break the puzzle of eternal life and death that has persisted for thousands of years. If that's the case, why should I regret my death? With a determined mind, he became extremely excited, with flushed cheeks and bloodshot eyes. Subconsciously, he glanced at Lin Jingyu's body and reached out his hand. But halfway through, he stopped, pondering. This matter is of great importance. The various sects are extremely sensitive about their teachings, and are extremely taboo about learning from each other. If this were known to others and exposed, death would be certain. Lin Jingyu has excellent potential. If he were to be admitted to Qingyun, he would surely attract the attention of his seniors. At his young age, he might not be able to keep this huge secret. Thinking of this, he had a thought and shifted his gaze to Zhang Xiaofan, recalling his stubbornness and facing death during the day. He nodded and said, "Your aptitude is a bit lacking, but it doesn't matter. It'll depend on your own fate in the future." Without further hesitation, he reached out and patted Zhang Xiaofan's body a few times, using his remaining Buddhist power to awaken him. Zhang Xiaofan gradually woke up, his vision blurred and his ears buzzing. It took him a while to fully recover and see clearly what was in front of him, which startled him. His mouth wide open in shock, he saw the old monk covered in scars. His left side looked as if it had been burned, charred and ugly, with a heavy black aura on his face, giving him a lifeless appearance. But for some reason, the old monk looked excited, with a smile in his eyes. Additionally, he saw his playmate, Lin Jingyu, lying unconscious beside him. "What are you doing?" Zhang Xiaofan was stunned for a moment before stuttering out the question. Pootsie didn't answer directly but examined him, asking, "Young patron, why did you, a child, come to this remote place in such a storm?" Zhang Xiaofan was taken aback and said, "I saw you still standing in the temple in the evening, and then I saw that it was going to rain. This place is so dilapidated. I thought it would be very cold, so I brought you some food." Pootsie's mouth twitched, and he folded his hands, saying, Good, all things are fated, destined long ago. May the compassion of the Buddha be with you. Zhang Xiaofan asked in surprise. What did you say? Tutsi smiled gently and said, I said, young patron, we are fated to meet. In that case, the old monk has a set of cultivation methods. Would you like to learn them? Zhang Xiaofan asked. What are cultivation methods? Tutsi paused for a moment, then laughed, reaching out his dry, thin hand to pat his head and said, it's nothing special, just teaching some breathing techniques. After learning them, you have to promise me a few things. All right, Zhang Xiaofan seemed to understand but still said, tell me. Tutsi said, you must never mention this to anyone, not even your closest relatives. Can you do that? Zhang Xiaofan nodded and said, I won't tell, even if I die. Tutsi was shocked to see his resolute expression. Raindrops fell like swords and frost, wetting his small face, making him look a bit haggard. Tutsi took a deep breath, lowered his eyelids, and stopped looking at him. But he continued, also, you must practice this method once a day, but you cannot practice it in front of others. Only when it's quiet at night. Finally, you must never use this technique unless it's a matter of life and death. Otherwise, there will be great calamity. As he said this, he opened his eyes again, staring at Zhang Xiaofan and asked, can you do it? Zhang Xiaofan hesitated for a moment, scratched his head, looking confused, but finally nodded heavily. Tutsi smiled faintly, said nothing more, and began to transmit a set of mantras to him. This set of mantras was not long, only about 1,000 characters, but it was dry and difficult. Zhang Xiaofan exerted all his effort and spent 3 hours before he fully memorized it. Tutsi breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Zhang Xiaofan had completely memorized it. Looking extremely exhausted, he looked at Zhang Xiaofan with a hint of affection in his eyes and said, I've never thought of taking on a disciple in my life, but unexpectedly, I formed a master-disciple bond with you at the moment of my death. By the way, you should know my name. He paused for a moment and said, my Dharma name is Tutsi, a monk from Tianyin Temple. Child, do you know Tianyin Temple? Zhang Xiaofan thought for a moment and shook his head. Tutsi chuckled and said, you're really a child. Then he remembered something else, reached into his robe, and took out a deep purple bead. After examining it carefully for a while, he handed it to Zhang Xiaofan and said, keep this bead safe and don't let anyone see it. When things settle down in the future, find a deep valley cliff and throw it down. Zhang Xiaofan took the bead and said, I understand. Tutsi patted his head and said, we have such a destined relationship. I wonder if we'll meet again in the next life. Child, kneel down and kowtow to me 3 times, calling me master. Zhang Xiaofan looked at Tutsi, who had already put away his smile, with a serious expression, and nodded in agreement. He called out, master, and knelt down, kowtowing heavily 3 times. Just as he finished kowtowing and before he could raise his head, he felt the pat on his back, and suddenly, everything went black before he lost consciousness again.